On September 28, 2014, while I was on stage playing double violin for George Harrison's festival in Los Angeles, my dad and my brother were on stage for Prime Minister Modi's speech at Madison Square Garden. They moved to India about 2 decades ago, and we rarely see each other. I found out about their trip a couple of days later while watching John Oliver's Last Week Tonight on HBO. That's the nature of our relationship. I was born with my dad's last name, Subramaniam. Being the eldest of 4 in an Indian immigrant family, my relationship with him was really difficult from the get-go. As he said, I'm not a boy, I can't light the fire at his cremation, and I can't carry his name on. And I think when my mother passed away, I was a reminder a little too much of what he had lost. My mother, Gingger Shankar, was diagnosed with brain cancer at the age of 35 and passed away at the age of 42. I was 14 at the time. I think it was 2004 or 2005 as an adult that I decided to take on my mother's maiden name. To me, Shankar is a long legacy so rooted in Indian music and culture, but it kind of sets up a complicated identity for me because people always ask, you're related to Ravi, do you play the sitar? The first time I took LSD, I was listening to your grandfather. So it's a little bit tough, but most people I know have only heard of my granduncle Ravi Shankar. And when he passed away a few years ago, the world mourned. About a year later, right before my grandmother passed away, she gave me several scrapbooks with hundreds of photos of her life as a singer and dancer that I'd never seen before. And there were a few pictures of my mother, too, who's a talented singer in her own right. And it suddenly hit me that these are my heroes. It is through their struggle that I feel connected to this legacy. Born in 1926, my grandmother, Lakshmi Shastri, grew up in Madras. Her father, R.V. Shastri, was the first editor of Gandhiji's newspaper, Harijan. Her mother, Vishalakshi, despite having no formal education, was a strong-minded woman who believed that her daughters were talented and should be educated. At the age of 13, my grandmother was discovered by Uday Shankar and joined his renowned dance troupe at the Almora Center. A few years later, she married fellow troupe member and my grandfather, Rajendra Shankar, at the age of 15. Eventually, she moved to Bombay, starred in her first and only film, and had her first child by the age of 18. One of her last performances was playing the lead in the ballet Discovery of India, directed by Prime Minister Nehru. Shortly after, she was discovered to have pleurisy, and she heard the words she never wanted to hear, that her dance career was over. After she recovered, she took up typing and shorthand. She wrote stories, she did choreography and many film songs, but she was never satisfied. She was born for the stage, and it was during this difficult time that she gave birth to my mother. Soon after, they discovered she had an incredible voice, so she started studying with Abdul Rahman Khan. And after 5 years of intense training, in 1957, she gave her first public concert and quickly became one of the top Indian classical vocalists in the country. Fluent in many tongues, she recorded songs in over 14 languages and toured all across India. In 1962, she rejoined Uday Shankar's dance troupe, this time as a singer and a choreographer of the ballet, and they brought Indian music and dance to the Western audiences for the first time. In 1968 and 69, she joined Raviji at the tour to Woodstock. Right after that, in 1974, Vijay and Lakshmi were invited to perform at George Harrison and Ravi Shankar's tour. Performing to daily audiences all over the world, they played a huge, huge role in the tour's success, performing with the top artists of the day and being revered by Hollywood stars. I recently found out my 5'1" grandmother also did arrangements and conducted the orchestras when Ravi fell ill. Floating on the enthusiasm of the new continent, the family decided to settle in America. My mother, Vijay, started pursuing a degree at CalArts in music, but the life pressures of a young immigrant mother soon caught up with her. She was forced to give up her music career to raise 4 children, including myself, as my father was always on tour. Before she passed away, I think she had like maybe 3 jobs at a time. She was always working as a bank teller, cooking in an Indian restaurant, training to be a real estate agent. And for my grandmother, Lakshmi, the huge international tours were replaced by niche Indian classical concerts in high schools and churches. And I remember growing up watching her and thinking, wow, it's really amazing that she has this really cool singing hobby, not quite understanding the gravity of her legacy. And she was nominated for her first Grammy a few years before she passed away, when she'd put out like her 50th CD of something, and she was so excited. And I think she really loved the recognition, but I think she wanted more. I think after my mother passed away, what I remembered most about her was her illness. Only after watching my own daughter, Janani, grow up, I slowly started recovering memories of her. You know, the silly powder fights, watching the newest Disney movies, singing songs at the top of our lungs. My mother was obsessed with surprises. So no matter what we did, she would always find ways to get whatever we wanted, as a surprise, of course. One year, we begged to get a Christmas tree. It was such a big deal in the house, and we never got one. But somehow she went to Sears or something and got this ridiculously large, like 6-foot, tree that she brought into the house with snowflakes and decorations, and we still don't know how she brought it into the house. But going through the memories of my own life now, I can now see my mother as a peer. I think growing up, I had a lot of guilt and boundaries just being a woman and an artist, and I think I really got that from her. She came from an extremely musical legacy, but she was so self-critical and she had really low self-esteem. She taught herself music because the stars in the family were too busy with their own careers. But she was really talented and she wanted it too. So without telling them, at the age of 19, she entered the All India radio competition as a singer and won the top prize in a record deal. She fell in love during that time, so the family sent her away to London to go to beauty school, which she had no interest in studying at all. But she did prove that she could sing, so a few years later, she was invited to perform with Ravi and George on their tour. It was during this tour that she met my father, her fellow troupe member, and soon after they were married. But it happened again. She resigned herself to be a devoted mother and wife. A few years before she passed away, she wanted to make her record. And I remember hearing her voice and just thinking, who is this exquisite, exquisite woman? And how tough it must be for her to have her life and her talent go so unnoticed. But she was too sick. So the half-recorded songs she made when she was 19 are the last remaining recordings of her. We're going to perform a little bit of that for you today. Even today in LA, I know so many women that make the choice between careers and societal pressures. After having Janani, I wanted her to have a life outside of these boundaries. In Sanskrit, Nari means both woman and sacrifice. I can't think of a word that better describes my mother, my grandmother, and all the women that came before them. Thank you.
Oh takjunu, 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 tam, takjunu, takjunu, takjunu,
takadina, takadina, ta, takadina, takadina, ta, takadina, 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 tom, takadina, tom, takadina, tom.
Takutom tatim, takutom tatim, tatom takutom tatim, takutom tatim, tatom tom tatim, takutom tatim, takadina, takidata, takata, tata.
Takadini, takadina, takadimi, takadina, takadimi, takadina, takadimi, takadina, takadimi, takadina, takadimi, takadina, takadina, tom, takita, tom, takita, tom.
Targadakum, targadum, targadakum, targadum, targadakum, targadum, targadakum, targadakum, targadum, targadakum, targadum, targadakum, targadakum, targadakum.
Takadina, takadina, takadim, takadina, takadim, takadina, takadim, din, takadina, din, takadina, takadina, tom, takadina, tom, takadina, tom.
Takajunu, takadip, takajunu, tam, takadang, 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 takadip, takajunu, takadip, takajunu, takadong, takita, tom, takita, tom.
Takadini, takadimi, takadina, takadimi, takadina, takadimi, takadina, takadimi, takadina, takadimi, takadina, takadom, takita, tom, takita, tom. Takita, din,
Takita,
takadina, din, din, takita, din,
takita,
takadina, din, din, takita, din,
takita,
takadina, din, din, takita, din. Prasanna Devaraja.
Next module is also in praise of Lord Krishna, written by the poet Rashik.
would love to introduce a few people. I wanted to bring up Yunfan's son, who did the incredible visuals you saw today and all the animations. And our other partner in the project, Dave Liang, who I worked on the music with this whole time, who's from the Shanghai Restoration Project. And of course, our amazing special guest today, Prasanna Devaraja, who's my favorite percussionist on the planet. Thank you guys so much.